Today I want to talk about how to prepare for the apocalypse. And what I mean by that is not like the zombie apocalypse or the climate change apocalypse or I don't really mean a fantastical thing. I actually mean, you know, our life has been fairly stable. If you have, we're all, no matter how young you are or how old you are, you've had the privilege of living in a time when there's been a lot of prosperity and not very much war at least in America, in the UK and Australia, New Zealand, which are the primary people who watch my English speaking videos. Northern Europe, there's always been regional conflicts, and the issues in the Middle East are never ending, and Russia and Ukraine and Russia's ever-growing expansion. So there's always been issues, and there's always been war around the world. But most of the people who are going to be watching this, you've lived in a very stable and economically prosperous time. There's always been issues, but there's structural things happening right now that are once-in-a-lifetime stuff. And I strongly recommend, if you have not checked out the work of Ray Dalio, that you watch his video on the changing world order on YouTube. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description below. But it outlines perfectly the macroeconomic and macro political and cultural influences, not so much cultural, but economic and political influences that shape the world. So I guess the first thing I want to do is I want to convince you that the world's changing. And you want to be one of the people who's ready. Ray Dalio was one of the few people who predicted the 2008 crash because he watches for macro trends. And right now he's really worried, and I am too, because I'm watching the macro trends. And what we've had since 1945, since the end of World War II, is a world economic order that was led by sort of a liberal economic ideology of the United States. And that ideology was that, free trade is good. We want to have interdependent economies. And somehow economic liberalism is going to promote democracy around the world. Now, there's been a bunch of flaws with that particular theory. The rise of China is the perfect example of how you can be very economically prosperous and still retain a totalitarian regime. So, but the point is that the prosperity that we've seen in the economic development and all of that growth and cooperation, that's really the key. Cooperation. It's been a time of increasing cooperation. Even though there's all these conflicts and challenges, cooperation has been on the increase. Now, the fundamental shift is that cooperation is on the decrease, and that unilateralism. So, this idea of going your own way is increasing. So that's a fundamental shift. It's a global shift. And one of the problems that I've noticed with Americans in particular is that we don't think about the rest of the world enough. I fortunately have been exposed to enough of the rest of the world that I've always paid a little bit of attention to it. So I feel like I'm in a better position than most to kind of understand these global macroeconomic forces that are happening. But what's happening right now is that, culture is king. This is one of the things I say in my upcoming book. Culture determines everything. And it's a very underestimated power. And so the global culture is changing. There used to be a global culture of it's good for everybody if we try to increase cooperation, even if there's challenges along the way. But now the global culture is shifting into, and you can't just blame Donald Trump. I mean, he's he's a poster child of it. Not a very intelligent man from where I sit. Highest level of intelligence is expressed in one's ability to empathize and have compassion with someone else, because your hippocampus deactivates a little bit. Actually, I don't know if it's hippocampus. Your prefrontal cortex is where compassion lives. So probably the most intelligent people on planet Earth are the Buddhist monks that meditate and just have massive levels of compassion. In any case, he's just the poster child, and like is pushing out this agenda of unilateralism, of separation, of me first. So it's the opposite of cooperation. And there's just a me first, me and mine, and separation, and basically, oh my God, competition is the rallying cry of capitalism. And the silly thing about capitalism is that capitalism thrives in a cooperative environment. The more cooperation there is, the more capitalism thrives. And it's just hilarious that, it's not hilarious, it's super sad that the people who are the strongest proponents of capitalism don't understand the fundamental tenets that capitalism is 99% cooperation and, well, I can't say 99, it's 90% cooperation and 10% competition. If you look at all the underlying structures that hold the whole thing together. So what they're doing is peeling apart that underlying cultural context of cooperation, and that's going to most likely, nobody can really predict the future, but most likely it's going to tear apart the international economic order and political order that has been what we've seen for the last was 1945, that's 80 years, for the last 80 years. So that means that most of us have never lived through anything like this before. And Ray Dalio and cognitive biases, Ray Dalio is really good at articulating this a lot, but cognitive bias tells us that if something has not happened in our lifetime, we assume it's not really possible. And it's just, we're not really wired. It's the culture that will remind you when you have a strong, long-standing traditional culture. The systems of the mythology of the culture will remind you that there's things that are longer lasting, and the stories will tell you about how the rise and fall of civilizations and how you deal with that. So we don't really have that right now. So we're in an unfolding right now. I used to be primarily focused on the ecological unfolding of the planet, driven by, the human domination of the ecosystems of every place on Earth. And I still am, but what's happening now is an economic unfolding and a political unfolding, and that we have to prepare for that. So how do we prepare for that? So that's part one of this talk. Is like, I hope you're convinced. And if you're not, go watch Ray Dalio's stuff. It's so clear. Any intelligent thinking person who's been paying the littlest bit of attention, if you can get past the fear of admitting that something is truly big is changing, it's not good. It's easy to change it's easy to accept the idea that something good and big is changing and coming, but to accept that your life may be fundamentally uprooted is a difficult thing to stomach. None of us really want to go there, but it's time, and we do need to. And the truth is that the timelines are a little fuzzy. Like, it could be okay in the next few years, or it could go totally south in the next few years. We could sort of ride out 10, 12, 14, 15 years, or it could crash and burn. So my philosophy has always been this. So this is, I guess, principle number one of how to deal with this coming apocalypse. So I'm a firm believer that the apocalypse is coming, and it's not going to look like everybody's going to die or whatever. What it's going to look like is the economic structure, like in World War II, the whole world economy basically collapsed and revolved around war. So that's one option, like that could happen. Or we could just see a radical recession or depression. Those things could happen too. According to Ray Dalio, and I don't really know the specifics of that, we're very similar to the 1930s right now. The systemic issues that were happening in the 1930s are what are happening right now, driving a lot of division and unrest. So in any case, the first principle to deal with the coming apocalypse is to have a plan for both. So you plan for the apocalypse and prosperity. So you don't want to be spending your life being a prepper and then using all your resources towards being a prepper, and then your life sucks. You know, you want to have a life that both prepares you for the potential the potential downfalls that can happen in the future, and also position you in a place where you're going to reap the benefit if things go great. So for example, in my life, one of the ways that we've done that is we have a homestead. So we have a 40-acre homestead. I worked really hard over the last 25 years to make that happen. And so we have that, and we can produce food. We're working on getting together our power infrastructure. We've got our water infrastructure. So that's one. But in another sense, that's also a modern day asset. Like that, I'm in the North Bay area, that could be sold if, you know, economic prosperity is happening, if we want to. So it's a win-win. Now, I was just thinking about a lot of the infrastructure things I need to do. Like I want to get goats for potential food, and but there's also a lot of time involved, and so there's always weighing back and forth which way you're going to go, because you only have so many hours in the day, and you need to focus your energies. So, you know, being a homesteader is an incredible time suck. Most people don't realize that. You know, there's a couple of books which I highly recommend to everyone, Essentialism and The One Thing. And both of those books are really about narrowing down your focus to that which matters most, and letting go, saying no to a lot of stuff. So if you're deciding to become a homesteader as one of your options, you got to realize you're going to have to let go a lot of other stuff. And that only really makes sense if you enjoy the homesteading life, which is a much more hands-on, nature-oriented life. So I guess number 2 would be read Essentialism and The One Thing, or at least get some summaries and really sort of ask yourself the question, what's the one thing I can do that's going to make everything else that's important to me easier or unnecessary? And what are the essentials? I think that's the main question of The One Thing by Gary Keller. And the essential question of essentialism is, what's non-essential in my life? What do I really don't care about that I'm actually spending a lot of time on? You can do time assessments. Some people are really into those things. And then the big question, I think, from that book is, what am I willing to let go? What will I actually stop doing? Stop buying, stop entertaining, sell, whatever. Just what am I willing to let go to actualize an essential vision for my life? So once you've done those two things, then I would lay out like 4 strategies for the coming future. So, for example, you know, option 1 is global markets rebound. China and the United States learn how to cooperate with one another. Russia stops trying to invade the rest of Europe, and a peace is negotiated. So everything works out. Everything works out. Your job is still secure. All that stuff happens. So what do you do then? You know, for me, what I do is I keep doing what I'm doing, because I already have the four-pronged plan laid out. Well, not exactly, but I have most of it laid out, either consciously or unconsciously. It's probably time to write down more of it again. I've done it in the past. I haven't just done it at this stage yet. So Stay focused. I'm doing this while I'm driving, so I can't be 100% like into the camera. I have to be kind of driving, so it's a bit of a split focus. So the focus. So what I would do in my particular scenario, as an example, is I would continue to contract to do my electrical contracting work, some general contracting work. I continue to write my book. I continue to edit, do small videos like this. And I continue to work on my infrastructure on my homestead. That's like everything continuing as it is. Then let's say scenario 2 is we head into a deep recession or even a depression. Okay, at that point, my income disappears, right? So when my income disappears, what do? Well, in that scenario, I might actually declare bankruptcy because I chose intentionally not to get a home mortgage because I wasn't confident that the global economy was going to keep rolling. So that was one of my planning for a possible exit strategy. You know, in 2008, the people that were hosed were the ones that leveraged themselves. You know, and so I'm a bit leveraged, but not against my house. You know, so if I get hammered by being leveraged from the money that I've borrowed, what I lose is my reputation with the banks and the credit card companies. And frankly, I don't really care about them. And frankly, they don't really care about me. You know, I have a couple of loans with individuals in my life, and I'm gonna pay them back because I care about them and they care about me. And I'm gonna try to pay back all of my loans, but if macro forces bigger than me blow apart the global economy and the local economy, I'm going to bail out of my obligations to those large institutions, and hopefully we'll have less repercussions than if I had. Well, it would be. It's a lot less repercussions if I had that debt attached to my house, because they'll take the one thing that I have. You know, I think it's important to say to earth-loving people around the world, don't ever give up your land. You know what I mean? It's like, that was the biggest mistake any indigenous culture has made. I mean, a lot of them were just killed and pushed out, but if in any case you could keep your land, keep your land. It's the one thing that will keep you thriving and surviving in the long run. So that's the second thing. You know, and let's say third case, in a third scenario that gets even worse, let's say now not only do we fall into a deep recession, but we fall into, so I didn't continue on with that. So let's say recession or depression. So recession or depression happens, all of our incomes dry up. What are you doing? What's your plan? So for me, I got bankruptcy, and then whatever, I have a couple of units on my house other than my own. Then all those people that live there now, I basically have one family, and then I have another place which I'm looking for another person. Those people that come into my land are going to be community members. They're going to be people who are going to be, you know, working the land, working the animals, trying to produce food, trying to produce, you know, wood for heat, repairing things. So that's my other part of that scenario, is like, if those people come, if that scenario happens, then, and everybody else loses their income too, then I turned my units on my property that I don't live in into housing for people who do work trade and contribute around the land so that we can all survive better. Again, cooperation beats competition every time. All right. So let's say next worst case scenario. Next worst case scenario is that global recession, depression, United States recession, depression, and then we go into a full collapse of production systems, food or whatever. Like it becomes, so for example, maybe like in Argentina where the Argentinian dollar is like, you can't even hold money. because it doesn't mean anything. So then that, in that case, then that shifts even deeper into what I'm doing on my land, where I learned, one of the things that I learned in my past was how to raise goats and make cheese. I live in a mixed forested area, and goats are by far the best caloric producer. They just turn the weeds into milk and meat. So I would double up on my goat herd, and I would start producing cheese and meat. And also my food forest too. I continued to do my plantings and my seed savings. And then the other important critical part in that aspect is to build a cooperative network of people who are in your region that are like-minded. Now, I honestly have not done as good of a job as I should in my area of connecting with other farmers and people who are living off the land, and I'm going to work on that one. And so the main point I'm trying to drive home here is that all of these things are aligned with my values and what I'm trying to do in the world. And so you just take whatever you like and enjoy and are good at, and then map them on to these worst case scenarios. A good exercise, this is one of the things that I would do, and that I did do, when I was kind of freaking out a little bit about the direction of the global economy and whether things were going to accelerate in a negative direction. I actually asked ChatGPT. Now I'll do a whole other talk on ChatGPT because there's a specific way you should use it. You always want to use it as an intelligent friend. You don't ever just trust everything that it says. You just use it as an intelligent friend that knows a lot of facts. But what I did with ChatGPT is I told it to coach me, to give me a strategy of what to do in case these scenarios laid out. And what it would do is it would take me through to the next step. So there's a Stoic practice in which you ask yourself, well, what next? So something bad happens, you get cancer. Well, then what next? You think, well, I go to cancer treatment. Well, what next? And then if you survive, well, what next? And then then you're in recovery. Well, what next? And then you rebuild your life. And so you move past the crisis point, because we all focus on that one horrible thing that could happen to us, because that gave us the best chances of survival in nature. But it can be paralyzing in modern society. So you focus on that negative thing that could happen, like the collapse of the civilization, and then you do what next. So for me, when I asked ChatGPT to help me create these action plans in the future, it helped me lay out all these things that I could do, where I could be building community seed networks, and I could be building skill trade networks in my community, and I could do more coaching and resilience training. So the point is that whatever your skills are, whatever you're trying to create, if you look past the crisis to what you do after the crisis, there's a very creative, beautiful life there for you. It follows in line with this idea that the problem is the solution. So you can find an amazing life no matter the circumstances around you. So the circumstances of your life are simply, they're kind of like the canvas of the art that you're going to paint. Maybe you have a giant canvas, or maybe you get a little tiny canvas, but that canvas sort of gives you the edges that you work around. Every great artist knows that you need limitations to make something work. So it's the same thing in your life. The circumstances of your life are the canvas, and then you build inside of that canvas your beautiful life. So going through this exercise, I did it with ChatGPT. You can try to do it on your own, of working through the scenarios of where your life's going to go after the transition through the negative thing. So then let's go to the next worst case scenario. I'm not sure if I fully fleshed out all of the how to deal with the third case scenario, but let's go to the fourth case scenario. So worst case scenario, I mean, there's a lot of worst case scenarios, but let's just go worst case. So worst case is we revert to total dictatorship. We're in a world war. The environment starts collapsing. So the sea levels rise. We dropped off an ice shelf in Greenland, and in Antarctica, and sea levels go up 5 feet, 3 feet, whatever. The ports no longer work. Coastal roads and cities are underwater. Well, what do we do then? So then it's even deeper, that's a tough one, because then people get scared and they might get a little violent. So that's the reality too. Also, there may actually be violence in the future, like more violence in our world. And it's so interesting, like being a peace-loving Buddhist meditator, interdisciplinary, religious scholar. I don't want to fight any wars, but the truth is that when people get scared, they get violent, and they don't think clearly, and they just try to feed themselves. And so what do you do in that case? Now, in that scenario, to be honest with you, I don't really have a good plan. But I think probably what I have done a little bit differently than most people is I have a pretty secluded property, and that is probably going to help. But, I don't know. There's not a whole heck of a lot I could do. But I'd say worst case scenario would be I would migrate. I would emigrate to a place that was less violent if we had more violence here. What American ever thinks about emigrating due to violence in America? Like, no, we don't think about that. But why not? Why not think about that? Why not play out all the scenarios so that you have at least if something happens, you at least have thought through the various options that are in front of you. Because if you sit in this cognitive bias that since it hasn't happened in my lifetime, it's not likely to happen, then you're not going to be prepared, and you're going to be one of the 99% of those people that is in incredible pain and chaos. And if I hope anything for my brothers and sisters who love the earth and care about democracy and higher wisdom and consciousness and compassion, I want you guys to survive and repopulate the earth. After the great turning that occurs, then we can start repopulating the earth. It is quite a bummer right now to see all the far righters trying to populate the earth and the far lefters like not having kids. It really bums me out. Anyways, I hope that's helpful. Gosh, I don't really know how to recap and summarize it other than to say, think past the crises. Have a 4-part plan, and make whatever you prepare for, make sure that it's what you're putting your limited time and energy into works out whatever happens in the world. You know what I mean? Whether the world goes to shit or whether the world plugs along and it's chaotic, whatever, or whether it becomes a utopia, you're gonna thrive inside of that. So be a broad, adaptive human being with good compassion and wisdom skills. And then the other thing I think I don't put enough emphasis in, because I've just been kind of struggling to find my community, is we all need to get together and do this as a community. We can do it as an online community at first, but we also definitely need to be in-person community. And then one last thing, this is a request. If anybody listens to the end of this, I have a very specific request. I'm looking for an ecological community, or hopefully a group of people who want to build an eco-village. An eco-village, and I'm a surfer, so I have very specific ideas about this. I want to have at least a second home, if not my primary new residence, depending on what happens in the world, in an eco-village with a nice right point or right hand waves, and where we can grow all our own food, where it's a relatively stable area or defensible, and where there is a bunch of like-minded, high consciousness, aware human beings who want to live this new life. anyways, if you know of that or any people who are interested in that, let me know. I'm all ears. I've been researching. I'm just chatting now. You can cut off the video whenever you want. I've been researching these potential communities, and I've just been using AI and trying to tweak all these different variables. And what keeps coming up is, like Santa Teresa or Nosara in Costa Rica, which are pretty expensive now. Then there's, I think it's Santa Catalina in Panama, and then Playa Banao, I think is in Panama. And then, a couple of the places in Mexico, like Sayulita, even maybe Scorpion Bay, or potentially Lobitos in Peru, and a couple of Ecuadorian places. And those are all the American ones. And then there's, Erisea, Portugal, and, even Morocco, Tagazout, Morocco, interesting spot. And, anyways, it's pretty fun to think about, to try to find these beautiful little communities. I don't know about you, but I've been really struggling to find community in my area. I love my homestead in the mountains, but I don't really have enough community. I really need more community. I need to create more of a structure, and that's going to be a task. The problem is the solution, right? So one of the things that I'm working on now is how to create community, because that's the problem. One of the fallacies of homesteading is that you can do everything yourself, and you just can't. And besides, it's a horrible life. I don't want to say it's horrible, but it's incredibly time-consuming and painful. You can't really do anything else. So you need people, other people to trade with. There's a reason that we live in a system of international economic trade, and that being transformed will have huge negative consequences for our standard of living, because it's really efficient when we cooperate with one another. So there again lies in, I'm just going to say this would be, no like you. Big giant truck driving too fast, jerk. Yeah, some people are jerks, and they shouldn't be able to get away with it. What was I saying? Economic, cooperation. So I'd like to wrap up on this point. Cooperation is the thing. The reason that we have prosperity is not because of competition. It's so dumb. I mean, I don't understand how all these intelligent people don't get this. The reason we have prosperity is because of the high level of cooperation between the 8 billion people on Earth. The more cooperation there is between those 8+ billion people on Earth, the more prosperity there is. The more conflict and separation, the less prosperity. It's just numbers. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I guess I just want to say this, humans, we are so, myself included, but at least if you're trying to figure it out, I think you're one step ahead of the game. We are so myopic, short-sighted, narrow-sighted. We are so stuck in our own ideological view of the world that we don't see the reality in front of us. And unfortunately, the people that are more rigid and stuck, they are really effective. They can really get a lot of stuff done by just hammering the same thing over and over and over again. And that hammering of that same thing over and over again produces results, but it also destroys. It just destroys so much. It's like Darth Vader, he gets lost in the machine of the Empire, thinking that the Empire is the best way for humanity to live. And it's, democracy's messy, and cooperation is difficult, and you never quite get what you want. but it's always better than conflict. It's always better than just trying to suppress what the other person's needs or desires or wants are. Oh man, it's just maddening to me to see, to see Donald Trump, the pinnacle of anti-cooperation, just running the free world. And it's not just him. Again, it's not just Donald Trump. It's these macro forces that are pushing someone like Donald Trump to the forefront because he represents a way to fight against change. Unfortunately, which never works. So all the perceived benefits that he's going to give to all his perceived followers are not really going to manifest. I mean, there will be some short-term benefit. It's almost like all the stuff that when I was a kid, I saw that how Reagan was dismantling the environmental protections and the worker rights and the consumer protections, all that kind of stuff. It's like now he did it sort of with a little knife, and now we have Donald and Elon with their axe and machete just like hacking things to pieces. And they think that somehow hacking things to pieces and just making it work for the ultra wealthy and the ultra right-wing ideologues is going to somehow be the answer. Well, it's not going to work out in the long run. But that's my prediction. In any case, I got off on a political rant on the side there. You can't all these things are all interconnected, though. I doubt anyone who's listening to my stuff is a hardcore right winger. But anyways, you take care. I hope that was helpful.